This program is made possible by the loyal financial support of the friends and partners of Family Policy Institute.
You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world.
Good evening and welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. Tonight I'm speaking via Zoom to ACDP MP Steve Swart, and we're going to be talking about SONA, or the State of the Nation address delivered by President Cyril Ramaphosa on the 11th of February. Steve, welcome to the program and so great to have you back.
Yes, good evening, Errol, and thanks again for inviting me. Thanks again to Family Policy Institute for the incredible work you do. Keep up the good work. We're fully behind you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Steve, and we're very appreciative of the work you do in Parliament. And I was watching SONA and saw you and Pastor Kenneth. I only could see the top half of your faces because you were covered with the mask. But so I wanted to just talk about some of the statements the President made at the State of the Nation address. And in particular, we want to just start with the vaccines, because that is sort of the topic of discussion. The AstraZeneca vaccines arrived in the country with a lot of pomp and ceremony, and now we find out it's not really that effective, and now they're trying to get more vaccines from Johnson & Johnson and other people. The question, Steve, I want to ask you is, government knew about that we needed vaccines last year already. So, the lockdown was in March, and 577 billion rand, I think it was, set aside to fight the coronavirus. But here we find ourselves almost a year later, and government is still scrambling to get vaccines. Shouldn't they have been prepared for this year? They had a year's notice.
No, absolutely. And it's almost a year since we had the first case of COVID-19 in the country. That was the 6th of March. I still remember speaking in Parliament on that day, little knowing that a week later, on the 14th of March, I would have COVID-19. And we're very grateful for all the viewers that prayed for us and that we recovered, myself, Louise, my wife, and my daughter. But the issue of vaccines, very, very important that people know what is contained in the vaccine, that there's informed consent. That is a basic principle, a doctor-patient relationship. You need to know what is in that vaccine. And of course, you need to make sure that it is efficient. That's what is the help of having a vaccine that has a shelf life that is about to expire. And again, there are millions of rands spent on the AstraZeneca vaccine, and it is shambolic, and it's disgraceful, in fact. We, from our perspective, have also now gone to court on the issue of ivermectin, which is a safe treatment. We say that and we believe that it is something that can help with the battle against COVID-19. It's 40 years old. It's been proven. A lot of people are using it. Why aren't doctors allowed to prescribe that? And it's a contradiction. You have, in this case of ivermectin, every doctor now has to fill in a Section 20 application and forward that, which costs 300 rand, whilst with the vaccines that are coming in, there's a blanket Section 21, as I understand it. And it is a concern to me, has it been properly tested? It seems not to be the case, with the South African variant being found not to be, the AstraZeneca not effective against the South African variant. So yes, a lot of questions to be asked. We've also obviously concerned about the issue of corruption, as you pointed out, the 500 billion rand with the relief aid. How much money now is going to be wasted, having purchased that AstraZeneca, the 1 million doses at millions of rands of costs? How much money is going to be spent on distribution, on the actual administering of the vaccines, and how can we get the assurance that there's no corruption? Remember now, as with the COVID-19, I'm on the Finance Committee, as with the COVID-19 expenditure with the PPEs, there was allowed, because it was emergency, there was a deviation allowed from Treasury regulations. Now, so help me if it's allowed again, deviations for the procurement, and it is in the hands of the state. We cannot trust the state. We've got to have accountability. We've got to have openness and transparency so that we can see exactly what's every cent that is spent on the vaccines and whether it is safe or not.
Absolutely. So, Steve, one of the things you raised was ivermectin. So there was a whole hullabaloo about that. So what are the command council that apparently consists of medical scientists? What are they saying about this? Because many doctors overseas and everything have been saying this ivermectin is good, but yet we have politicians stopping it or opposing it, even though it's helpful to people. And so many people have died in our country. So this is unacceptable. Why is this happening, and why isn't the medical fraternity speaking up regarding this issue?
So the issue about ivermectin is it goes back 40 years. It's been proven. It's mainly proven for human use. It's known as a miracle drug. And there have been questions about how effective it is for COVID-19. There's actually the South African Dr. Marek, who from the frontline doctors in America has done tests, and it helps with the treatment. And it's very important. So why has our government, initially in December, the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority said, no, they're not allowing it at all. But it's in the country, it's everywhere in the country, in every co-op, it's a veterinary product as well, mainly used for that. So people are buying it there and using it. And unfortunately, there isn't that regulation. So what we are saying is allow doctors to prescribe it in the right doses, and it is critical. It's absolutely disgraceful because lives are at stake here. Many people have been taking it and have recovered. And so we have resorted to litigation at great cost, together with a number of doctors' organizations. And yes, they say there's not enough clinical trials, but it can't do any damage. It can't do any damage. It's been proven safe for human use. So even if it doesn't have any impact, why shouldn't you as a doctor be allowed to prescribe it? That's what we're asking. And we're allowing chemists to be able to compound it. It's professionalism. There are other activist groups that are saying it must be widely available. And there are desperate people. And we think that this is one of the possible remedies. But we are concerned why government isn't allowing that, why government isn't speaking about vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, why there is this total reliance on vaccines with a lot of questions. And we're not anti-vaccines. We just want to know what is in it, and so that people can take an informed consent when they take it.
So Steve, here's the question. The million-dollar question is, are you confident that government is going to get this right, that we're actually going to get the right vaccines at the right time? It's going to roll out, and the 40 million people are going to be vaccinated. Those who want to be vaccinated, that is.
Well, firstly, my concern is, why is government controlling this whole process? Why are they not allowing the private sector to come on board that knows how to negotiate prices? They would have done it last year already. Why is that the absolute control? That immediately raises alarm bells with me. As we know, you correctly said it should have been done last year. The last minute, scientists are running around trying to get vaccines whilst the department has failed us. So it is a concern of mine. And you're talking about an estimated 20 billion rand to roll out vaccines for everyone in the nation. It is another, and I've said it before, I am concerned that the president is going to say in a few months' time, I'm deeply shocked about the corruption with the distribution of the vaccines.
Absolutely, because he said...
I said it last year.
Yeah, and
exactly. And so this is my concern.
You said this about the PPE, the protective equipment, right? That we're going to roll this out. We set aside 500 billion, and then they got in another 77 billion from the World Bank and all kinds of other people. And he said, with this, we're going to make sure that there's no corruption. We're going to roll out this thing and everything. And a few months later, there was multiple investigations in all the fraud, and it was even in the president's office. His spokesperson and her husband, everybody in the ANC appears to be involved. It was a feeding frenzy, and it horrified me that a thing like a deadly pandemic where people are dying and depending on these protective gear, that our government that is supposed to be protecting people would resort to, the people in government would resort to fraud and corruption and theft and in a pandemic, and put people's lives at risk. And this is what this government has done. And people have died because they couldn't get the equipment they needed because of the fraud and corruption. So what's saying that with this rollout of the vaccines, there's not going to be massive corruption involved in that? There is absolutely no guarantee.
If you look on the ANC's webpage, and this was in today's Financial Mail, that you look, they've got the Progressive Business Forum on the ANC's page, which encourages companies and probably that will align somehow with the ANC to be involved in procurement, applying for tenders of procurement for vaccines. And I think this is a big concern. So we have to exercise oversight. And one of the good things about last year was people were outraged correctly. I was outraged. I've never seen such public outrage against that, where people are dying, where we had this hard lockdown, people are losing jobs, and here the money that we've got is being stolen. At least the Auditor General and the auditors picked it up quite quickly. So I'm again saying we need real-time audits for this procurement of any vaccines and the expenditure. And I'm concerned, again, why the National Treasury has allowed deviations from their normal Treasury regulations, because that's what resulted in the fraud and corruption last year. So yes, I have great doubts about whether this is going to be effectively rolled out. I know a lot of people are anxious to get vaccines, but it is a matter of great concern as to whether government themselves will be able to roll out, bring in the private sector, and those that want to have the vaccines, those that have an informed consent, know what it contains, know the side effects, they can do it very quickly. Obviously, your frontline workers, which I applaud, need to consider that themselves, whether they want to have and be protected. But we just see one wave after of COVID-19 coming, and people joke, wave after wave, that's why the beaches were closed. But you can joke, it's a very serious matter. The whole lockdown, the whole hard lockdown, which we've obviously, we will chat about that, the impact on the economy and things like that, it's absolutely disgraceful. We've got to save lives and livelihoods.
Absolutely. The both things. You got to have a balance here. You can't just shut down everything to stop the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then millions of people lose jobs, because that is even going to be a worse scenario for the nation. Before the pandemic hit, South Africa was already in a crisis as far as jobs and the economy was concerned. So, Steve, we're going to go to a break now, but I want to talk about the corruption issue, because that is, I think, one of the biggest issues preventing South Africa from getting to where it needs to go. But we'll talk about the corruption and some other issues in the second segment, so don't go away. More with Steve Swart of the ACDP after the break. Welcome back to the program. I'm speaking to ACDP MP Steve Swart. Now, Steve serves on the Finance Portfolio Committee and many others, and so he speaks very authoritatively into these issues. So I'd love having him on the show just to give us a kind of biblical view of SONA, the State of the Nation address that President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered on the 11th of February. So, Steve, back to you. So we're talking about the corruption issues, the fact that government needs 20 billion for the vaccines, and that 9 billion was wasted by the State Security Agency. We're wasting hundreds of billions here. Forget about 20 billion. We could have paid for these vaccines over and over again. But now the corruption issue. The president said at SONA, we're introducing another commission to oversee corruption, or to stop it, or to address the corruption issues in our country. Yes. Now, we've heard this before, the fusion group, the this, the that, and all kinds of things at different SONAs, but the corruption doesn't stop. It continues. And those committing the corruption is not held to account, like Aish Magashula, like Jacob Zuma, and many, many others. They haven't faced a day in court, even though ordinary South Africans have been arrested for going to the beach. So the law is very, very stringent there. But when it comes to government officials and ANC officials stealing billions and billions of South Africans' taxpayers' money and destroying the economy, we don't see too much movement in that area.
No, absolutely. So what the president is referring to is basically the scorpions that were closed down. The scorpions were closed down, as you know, because they were too effective in prosecuting ANC-aligned people. That is the reason why they were closed down. I fought that. They were an independent body that were trained, that were very effective. And so the idea is a similar law enforcement to Parliament. But my view is there are enough agencies around. had they not been hollowed out under the Zuma administration, I'm talking about the Hawks, I'm talking about the National Prosecuting Authority, I'm talking about the Asset Forfeiture Unit, even SARS. We've seen all these commissions, how they were basically hollowed out, that they were ineffective in stopping state capture and corruption. So let us also as believers be grateful, because we pray that corruption will be exposed. Maybe we didn't realize that it would be this extent. 500 billion rand is what former Minister Pravin Gordhan, President Minister of Public Enterprises, estimated. There's tens of billions of rands that can be collected. And that is what I've been saying continually. I'm the longest serving member. I'm very grateful of the Justice Committee. I've been saying to the Minister of Finances, equip these law enforcement officials, give the SIU a double budget, give the NPA a double budget. They can collect tens of billions of rands that is sitting overseas. But there's good news. The good news is the Zondo Commission. Now, you'll remember I sat on the ESCOM inquiry at Parliament, where we prayed a lot. The Lord exposed so much, and there was such pressure. There was such pressure on the MPs from their own members of the ANC, as well as outside people. Many death threats, and a lot of that information that we garnered together there at the ESCOM inquiry went to the Zondo Commission. And yes, it is a flood of information, a flood of evidence. But what is remarkable is that the regulations have been amended in the Zondo Commission to allow the evidence that is brought before the Commission to be used by the criminal prosecuting authorities. That is a game changer. All those forensic investigators that were fired during the Zuma administration to protect them, many of them are sitting with the Zondo Commission. Many have picked up the experience. They've got all the evidence. They are now going to be, we believe, and we're going to push for that, to assist the Hawks and assist the NPA to quickly bring these cases to court. Yeah. So the wheels of justice turn slowly, but they do turn.
But Steve, when do you estimate you'll begin to see prosecutions start happening?
The challenge with the NPA having been hollowed out, and a lot of, you can read about in the newspapers what happened. A lot of the expertise was lost, a lot of the evidence was lost, and we saw the caution is, and I fully appreciate it, we saw it in the Stina Dairy case against some of the Guptas and some of the people where they brought a court case and they had to withdraw it and the High Court threw it out. So we've got to be very cautious that every forensic evidence must be obtained, bank statements must be obtained, and so that the cases must be watertight. The ones against Ace Magashula, he's appeared in court. I don't think they would have arrested him and got him to appear in court had it not been watertight. There are many, many cases, and I'm sure the viewers and your anxiety, your frustration that it is taking so long for these cases to come to court. But bear in mind, it takes time to reinforce what was hollowed out before. And yes, we are pressing every time the National Prosecuting Authority or the SIU appear before us. We say, when are we going to see prosecutions? Another very important aspect is the Special Investigating Unit has got a special tribunal now of judges that sits on their matters. So they're busy stopping a lot of the COVID-19 contracts that were awarded, collecting the funds. But as you say, the enormity of the corruption in the nation almost overwhelms your law enforcement. And so you've got to have a biblical mind view of stewardship. Stewardship. This is not your money to steal. You are entrusted as government officials to look after and not to steal it. And of course, servant leadership. Those are principles. We're not seeing that at the moment. We're seeing an increase, in fact, in corrupt activities.
Absolutely. So there is some hope. There's some movement as far as prosecutions go, and we're going to see that in the near future. But our economy has been devastated, not only by ANC policies, but by job losses because of the pandemic and all the other things that is happening in our nation. So as far as economic recovery is concerned, the president made a number of statements, some ideas he put out there for economic recovery. Just your view on it. You've served, as you said, a very long time, more than 20 years, I think it is, on the Finance Committee and the Justice Portfolio Committee. But you have a good understanding of where our economy is and what is needed to revive it. So what is your views, Steve?
Well, yeah, thank you, Errol. Last year at this time, we had the budget. The budget's going to be presented again next week, about 2 weeks' time. But the budget last year was dire. We were already in a recession. You know what, praise, I wish we were in the situation that we were a year ago. Now, we are in 10 times worse situation almost.
That's right.
We had one of the world's hardest lockdowns. Businesses were closed and almost 2 million people lost their jobs. Thousands of small businesses have closed. They are not going to recover, many of them. And so what we've seen is a dramatic escalation in our state finance debt levels. It is staggering. What we also see, our debt to GDP ratio, which was last year about 65%, is going to shoot up to 88%, and people are saying it could be 100% to GDP. Now that is unsustainable. That is totally unsustainable. So we saw the extra 500 billion rand COVID relief funds, and it wasn't all of that was misappropriated. Some of it was spent for loans, some of it was spent for the tours, unemployment benefits to assist. But the economic reconstruction and restoration project or the plan that the president announced, we have to see more implementation of that. And at the moment, because of our state of our finances, you're not getting the investors that are required. Because of the sovereign downgrade, Moody's downgrading us to junk rating. Yes, our rand is still relatively strong. It hasn't weakened too much. But the debt levels, I mean, if you take the stats that our economic growth contracted by 7.8%. Now, you can't have a contraction of that amount. The budget deficit, 15%. 15%. What does that mean in terms? So the amount that our shortage of our budget was almost 700 billion rand. 700 billion rand, that's not the debt. The debt is almost 4 trillion. So to service that debt, it's like 200 billion rand you've got to pay. And so we've got to look going forward. We need economic growth. We need job creation. We need to be able to collect finances, taxes, so that we can address the fiscal consolidation part. That is what investors are saying. That's what Moody's are saying. That's what the International Monetary Fund is saying. You've got to have a fiscal consolidation path. Stop wasting money on SOEs, bailouts for SAA, Eskom. We're still having, that's the biggest threat to economic growth is Eskom, load shedding at the moment. And I can understand viewers. It's almost, there's a sense of great disappointment. You move from one thing, lockdown level 3 to power shortage level 3, 4 to water shortages. That's every angle you're looking at. There are dramatic challenges, and it comes to poor governance. It comes to cadre deployment of incompetent people, and that is what we've got to address. But we are hopeful that when we see
Steve, I just
yes.
want to come in there. And so on that point, so I think everybody knows that what we're suffering from is bad government, bad policies, theft, corruption, fraud, the whole thing. It's not going to stop with this government in place, because the ANC has been promising change and fighting corruption and all kinds of good things for years. When the Ramaphosa administration came in, people had a lot of hope there's going to be change. It's more of the same. We need to change the government. This country needs a new government of righteous people, competent people that care about the people of this country and will do what is right for the nation and not for their own selves, lining their own pockets, their cronies, their families, their friends. That's what the ANC is doing. Everybody knows that. It's all over the media. You can see it in the Zondo Commission. So what is the hope message, Steve? We've got 2 minutes left. What is your message to South Africa? What do ordinary people out there need to do to change this country?
There's always hope. And I see it daily. I see the miracles taking place as I travel around. I see the goodwill of the people. I see the resilience of our people. But government must be held accountable. And the best way of holding government accountable is at the elections. And we've got local government elections coming up. And what happened in the previous local government elections, the other opposition parties received enough support to take over certain metros. And in those metros, we have been governing well. There's a proven track record. And yes, some people will say cooperative governances, coalitions don't work, but there are a way forward. And so I would encourage those viewers to know that to hold people accountable is to change your vote. How is it that we have such massive challenges at local government level, yet continued votes are going towards the ANC. There must be a sea change when it comes to voting, where people can hold the ANC government accountable, particularly at local government level, where we see such devastation in our municipalities without infrastructure, without water, and it's time to hold people accountable. And we know what Exodus teaches us. It teaches us, Exodus 18:21, select capable men and women from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain. Just think, if we elected people like that, where our nation would be.
Yeah, I agree with you, Steve. And you, one of those people, trustworthy, competent, been doing a great job in Parliament representing the people of South Africa. But we have opportunities to make change. There are millions of people are praying. There's grassroots movements coming up now, independent candidates standing, righteous people, all kinds of things happening. But South Africans must stand up. Stop complaining. Stand up and do something. That is the clarion call now, because your country needs you like never, ever before. So, Steve, once again, I want to thank you for coming onto the show, for all the great information and insights you shared with us. Always appreciate it. And again, thank you for the sterling work you do on behalf of the people in Parliament, and for standing up for righteousness and truth, because that is what we need in South Africa.